From slashers to zombies, we here at What Culture do love a dumbest decisions list. But there's one corner of monster movies that rarely gets covered. Werewolf films, despite the monster being an early staple of the genre, are often overlooked unless they're one of the greats. However, there's a whole pack of fun and scary werewolf movies out there that just need a little bit of love. But as with other horror movies, they are also chock full of terrible choices. And surprisingly, there's far more than the obvious getting bitten by an animal and dismissing it as a dog attack. So let's sink our teeth into them, shall we? I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are the 10 dumbest decisions in werewolf movies. Number 10. Unprotected Sex, Ginger Snaps. This werewolf flick from 2000 dared to do so many different things. For starters, the main monster was in fact a teenage girl, using lycanthropy as a metaphor for sisterhood, female sexuality, and puberty. When Ginger gets bitten by a werewolf, she becomes more aggressive and sexually active, as well as sprouting a tail, of course. As she becomes more interested in the hanky-panky, she seduces and sleeps with her classmate Jason. Whilst this isn't outwardly a problem, it's revealed that they didn't use protection, and thus Jason gets infected with the beastly curse. Perhaps seen as a metaphor for sexually transmitted diseases, this endangers Jason and spreads the curse around the town of Bailey Downs. Luckily, Jason is cured of being a supernatural furry, but the point still stands. Unprotected sex is never a good idea. Number 9. Revealing the pregnancy, Underworld: Rise of the Lycans. The action horror franchise has seen plenty of dumb decisions, some of them by the filmmakers themselves. I mean, who decided that wall-crawling lycans was a good idea? But by far, the stupidest decision came in 2006's sequel, Rise of the Lycans. Lucian, the OG Lycan played by Michael Sheen, falls in love with the daughter of Vampire King Victor. This wasn't the best idea in itself, as Lucian is a slave and Sonia is a vampire princess. But it gets worse when they sleep together and Sonia falls pregnant. Sonia is imprisoned when her father discovers she aided Lucian's escape from the castle with a group of enslaved Lycans, and in an attempt to bargain for her life, Lucian reveals her pregnancy to Victor. A very, very bad move on Lucian's part. A furious Victor is shown to be heartless enough to kill his daughter, as Lucian is forced to watch Sonia burned alive when she is exposed to sunlight. This sparks the centuries-long war between vampires and Lycans, all due to Lucian's stupid decision. Number 8. Adopting a werewolf baby, Good Manners. Like Ginger Snaps, this 2017 werewolf flick shakes things up a bit. It follows the story of Clara, who applies for and gets a nanny job for a pregnant woman. The woman, Anna, begins acting oddly around a full moon, such as munching on a cat while sleepwalking. The birth of her child is just as weird, with Anna's stomach bursting open to reveal a little werewolf puppy. It would be adorable if Anna didn't die horrifically in the process. Clara could have just left the house then and there, leaving the critter behind to perish. But it tugs on her maternal instincts and she decides to adopt it. 7 years later, the werewolf baby, Joel, lives a normal human life except for on full moons when he is chained up in a special room. You just know it won't end well, especially when Joel discovers that Clara isn't his real mum and begins breaking away from the vegetarian diet she has been raising him on. He becomes dangerous and the townspeople turn on him in a way that echoes back to the monster movies of yesteryear. Ultimately, Clara's perceived act of kindness leads to more pain and suffering for herself, and for Joel, who spent much of his life locked up and hungry. That being said, the idea of a little werepuppy is actually quite cute. Number 7. Harassing a woman until she dates you, Blood and Chocolate. This 2007 romance horror film is very, very 2000s. You have angsty love triangles, a lot of brooding, and even Hugh Dancy before his role in Hannibal. And it's Dancy's character we need to wag the finger of disapproval at. The film tells the story of Vivian. She's 17, lives with her aunt in a chocolate shop in Bucharest, and she's a werewolf. Her aunt's ex-mate, Gabriel, leader of the seemingly all-powerful werewolf pack in Bucharest, is interested in Vivian. She's having none of it, wanting to live as normal a life as possible. Then in comes Aidan, Dancy's character. Aidan is a graphic novelist who's a bit too obsessed with werewolves for his own good. He doesn't know Vivian is actually a werewolf herself, but he makes a damn good job of making sure she has no choice but to date him. Aidan basically stalks Vivian, to the point where she physically runs away from him. Plus, he barges into her chocolate shop and starts sticking his fingers into the pots of melted chocolate. Why? Vivian is left with no option but to say yes to his insistent badgering, which only ends up with Aidan being the public werewolf enemy number 1. Hunted and captured several times, Aidan could have avoided all this trouble if he had just respected Vivian's wishes and left her alone. Number 6. Using a real werewolf in a lecture, The Wolfman. While this 2010 film doesn't hold a candle to the 1941 classic original, it has a gorgeous gothic atmosphere and impressive effects, with a fantastic lead performance from Benicio del Toro. That being said, a fair amount of the movie isn't all that great, with a dense script and a lack of anything particularly scary. However, the best scare of the movie is also the dumbest decision made by a character throughout the whole runtime. When Lawrence Talbot is bitten by a werewolf, goes on a rampage and is subsequently arrested, he is subjected to a whole bunch of psychiatric treatments that border on torture to try and cure his delusions. The doctor then decides to use Lawrence as a medical case study for a lecture, strapping him to a chair in the centre of the lecture hall on the night of a full moon to prove he isn't actually a werewolf. What a truly silly sausage that doctor is, as of course Larry viscerally transforms before the terrified audience and gets to doing important werewolf things like slashing, tearing and ripping. It's a massacre, and of course the doctor gets torn apart and Lawrence takes off into the night, off to do some more of that aforementioned werewolf business on the streets of London. You silly sausage indeed. Number 5. Dismissing the fortune teller, Cursed. An underrated Wes Craven flick, Cursed opened with 2 girls named Jenny and Becky getting their fortune told. As fortune tellers in horror movies often do, she warns the girls that they will be met with a terrible fate. And of course, this being a horror film, the girls simply roll their eyes and ignore her. Gee whiz, I sure wonder what will happen to those girls. Becky and Jenny's car later collides with an animal and the car of the film's protagonists. And I bet you I could tell you what the animal is. Becky is dragged out of the car and is gorily torn in half by the beast, whereas Jenny actually manages to escape. But she doesn't last much longer, as she is then attacked and killed by a werewolf upon leaving a party. The fortune teller was of course right all along, and perhaps if they hadn't been so snooty towards her, the girls may have been able to avoid their grisly demise. Number 4. Transforming on live TV, The Howling. Dee Wallace stars in this truly bizarre werewolf film, playing a TV news anchor named Karen who gets sent to a secluded island by her therapist to help her recover from a traumatic incident. The island turns out to be infested with werewolves, and after multiple grisly murders, Karen herself is bitten by one of them. She defeats the werewolves by burning the island to the ground and escaping. She then gets the bright idea to expose the existence of werewolves to the wider world. Why exactly is that a good idea, Karen? And why did you decide to do it by turning into a werewolf on live TV? Well, Karen does just that, transforming live on air. She's also shot live on air, Murray Franklin style, with a silver bullet by another escapee from the island. Yet this actually doesn't prove anything, as the people watching her broadcast at home think it was just a stunt or a hoax. Her choice was not only dangerous, but utterly pointless, and resulted in her own death, despite surviving the other horrors that plagued her throughout the film. Number 3. Ignoring Grandma's warning, The Company of Wolves. This film is beautiful, strange, compelling, and deliciously atmospheric. Rosaline is a young girl living in the 1980s, but dreams she lives in a magical forest in the 18th century. Wolf attacks begin cropping up around the village, with Rosaline's sister Alice being one of the victims. So Rosaline is sent to live with her grandma, who knits a very funky red shawl for her and warns her, amongst other things, that she shouldn't trust a man whose eyebrows meet. Following the beloved Red Riding Hood tale, Rosaline is taking a basket of treats through the woods to her grandma when she meets an attractive stranger. He bets that he can get to her grandma's house before her, and Rosaline agrees to the wager. The man, however, has eyebrows that meet in the middle. Rosaline's beau, of course, turns out to be a werewolf who kills Granny Dearest and then turns Rosaline herself into a werewolf. Whilst this is only one of several narratives woven throughout the film, it stands out as a stupid decision and fully deserves to be on this list as a result. Number 2. Stalking Laurie, Trick or Treat. This brilliant horror anthology movie is filled with brilliant stories, all linked together by the adorable burlap sack-clad critter, Sam. As they are all interconnected, the murderous teacher Wilkins from the principal segment is shown to later be following and murdering young women at the town's Halloween festival. He sets his eyes on Laurie, who's dressed up as Red Riding Hood. It appears that Laurie is another of Wilkins' victims, as a body wrapped in the red cloak is dumped by a fireside where a group of Laurie's girlfriends have been hanging out. Yet it's revealed that it is in fact Wilkins himself in the cape, beaten and bloody. He sees several bodies strewn about the place and realises that stalking this woman in particular was not his smartest move. As if it couldn't get any worse for him, Laurie divulges that this is her first time, turning into a werewolf right before his eyes and devouring him as her wolfy pals also transform and celebrate. Number 1. Wandering off the path, An American Werewolf in London. Whilst not all who wander are lost, some of them get turned into werewolves. Upon arriving at the Slaughtered Lamb pub, the 2 American tourists are not only warned but implored not to stray from the path by the locals. This they ignore and end up wandering off into the wilderness on the night of a full moon nonetheless. The 2 are attacked by an unseen animal, with Jack murdered and David being bitten. Cue hijinks involving Nazi werewolves, undead pals, and the most brilliant werewolf transformation scene ever put to film. And to think, David's horrible fate could have been avoided if only the 2 men had listened to the locals telling them to stick to the roads. Am I a tad glad that Jack and David did stray from the path on their hike through the Yorkshire moors, as it did give us the greatest werewolf movie of all time? Yes. Was it still a dumb decision? Also yes.